Thank you so very much, Professor. I really enjoyed your talks, all three of them. I think we should follow up on what you said. If you want to break the heart of an emperor, send a monk. Perhaps we should send a lot of monks to Washington, D.C. It might help. But I want to ask you something you did not touch on, and perhaps it's not important. This morning, just by accident, I was reading Paul's letter to Philemon, and a plea for Onesimus, that Philemon would free Onesimus, bring him back, accept him as a brother and no longer as a slave. And I don't know how widespread slavery was at that time in the time that you were talking about. But did this letter and other such statements by Paul in the gospel make any difference on slavery or not?
Unfortunately, no. Not enormously. Any more than our good wishes have made much difference on either war or banking. I think we shouldn't be too optimistic about religious influence on large institutions. I think what's important, though, and this is important, is yes, slavery was a very real issue. It was very localized, and I don't want to sort of slip out by saying not in my region, but it is interesting that there is not very much in Egypt, and there's not very much in the Fertile Crescent. And these are precisely the areas where debates on poverty are at their most extreme. And I don't know quite what the link is, but maybe in other areas you maintain, I think we're beginning to realize how cocky the average Roman civis was, the average Roman citizen, because he was a slave owner, and he was a small slave owner, with all the cockiness of somebody who has to control other people and feels his own rights. So we must not simply see slavery as a vast phenomenon of the great agro-business of the Roman latifundia. What made it tolerable in some ways and infinitely worse in others was its very widespread, but widespread in given areas. And I think that the interesting thing is how slavery, how the Christians created a huge discourse about wealth and poverty, and virtually none about slavery. And one really has to ask oneself why that is so. It's easy for us to point the finger and say tut tut, but maybe this was the only thing they could make a discourse about.
I do think we have time for one more question if there is one. So please, yes, here we go. Oh.
Hello, Professor Brown, thank you again for your talk. I was wondering something as I was reading Athanasius's Life of Antony. As many witnessed the harsh asceticism of Antony's life, many went to him seeking the same life that he was living. How did that affect a power struggle, if any, between monks and the bishops as they were leaving a bishop's authority to seek guidance from a monk?
Yes. My own feeling is we over-dramatize this. One thing we can say with absolute certainty about late antiquity, nobody read Max Weber. And my own feeling is that the conflict between organized and charismatic is a modern conflict that's become a mantra in early church studies. There should be a moratorium on it. If I were a local bishop, I would be delighted that people were being serious Christians, even if it meant a bit of a problem. The model of conflict between charisma and order is basically something which modern and medieval Christians have had to face, when Christianity is no longer a minority religion. And I think certainly in the 4th century, the view of the bishop And the view of the monks would be hang together or hang separately in what is still an unchristianized society. So I think that this is something one should always look out for, but one shouldn't make it a major explanatory device. Obviously these tensions are bound to exist, but what is against them is basically that feeling of an almost lifeboat mentality, that one is very glad to have more Christians around. If they take their Christianity seriously, that's even more fun, and you face the organizational problems afterwards. You see this very much, I think, by the ease with which Athanasius recruited monks to be bishops and clergy within a generation. And I suspect this isn't just Athanasius being the master politician, it's just the pressure. There aren't many other people. And I would have said that would be my answer.
Okay, well, before perhaps we take the conversation outside to the reception, let me formally close these 2012 James W. Richard lectures by offering a very sincere and warm thank you to Professor Brown, not only for 3 truly memorable lectures, but also for Professor Brown's willingness to spend so much time and energy talking to our students and faculty throughout this week. I'd also like to add, actually, it's been a great pleasure for me to host your visit with Betsy, and for all of us, really, to relish the 3 lectures you've just given. So please let's thank...
More time.